The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor, and every head in the jazz club turned toward the man in the tailored black suit whose eyes were locked on one table, one woman, one unforgivable sight. Jin Hyun-woo, Seoul's most dangerous mafia boss, had just seen his secretary laughing with another man, and the careful control he'd maintained for 34 years was about to explode in the most spectacular way possible. What started as jealous rage would end with a proposal, a pregnancy, and a complete dismantling of everything he'd built. But first, someone was about to get hurt. Zara Williams had exactly 3 rules for surviving as Jin Hyun-woo's executive secretary. Rule 1. Never acknowledge the blood on his hands, no matter whose name appeared in the obituaries after particularly tense board meetings. Rule 2. Never show fear, because predators could smell it, and Jin was the apex predator of Seoul's underworld. Rule 3. Never, ever let him see her personal life, because the moment he knew anything real about her was the moment she became vulnerable in a world where vulnerability meant death. For 18 months, these rules had kept her alive and employed in the most dangerous office in South Korea. 18 months of perfect coffee delivered at exactly 8:15 every morning. 18 months of scheduling meetings with men who carried guns under their designer suits. 18 months of maintaining the invisible line between Zara the competent professional and Zara the woman who had dreams, fears, and a life beyond these walls. Tonight, she'd thought she was safe. The Blue Note Jazz Club was across town, far from Jin's usual haunts, far from anyone who would recognize her. Marcus Chen sat across from her, his easy smile reminding her of home, of Atlanta, of a time before she'd become tangled in the web of Seoul's criminal empire. He was visiting from the States, her childhood friend who'd grown up 3 houses down, who'd taught her to ride a bike and who'd held her when her father died. "You've changed," Marcus said, his fingers drumming against his whiskey glass in time with the saxophone solo floating through the dimly lit club. "There's something sharper about you now. Harder." Zara laughed, the sound genuine for the first time in weeks. "You try working for Seoul's most terrifying businessman and see how soft you stay." "Businessman," Marcus repeated, his eyebrow raised. "Is that what we're calling it?" Before Zara could respond, the temperature in the room dropped. She felt it before she saw it, that electric charge that preceded Jin Hyun-woo like a storm front. Her spine straightened automatically, muscle memory from 18 months of conditioning, and when she turned her head, there he was. Jin stood in the entrance, flanked by 4 men who looked like they'd been carved from granite and violence. His black suit probably cost more than most people's cars, perfectly tailored to his lean, powerful frame. His face could have been sculpted by an artist obsessed with sharp lines and dangerous beauty. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath, those dark eyes that usually held all the warmth of a winter ocean, now burning with something she'd never seen before. He was looking directly at her. More specifically, he was looking at Marcus's hand, which rested casually near hers on the table. "Who is this guy?" The words came out low, barely audible over the jazz, but Zara heard them as clearly as if he'd shouted. Jin was moving toward their table, his men spreading out in a pattern she recognized from security briefings, blocking exits, controlling space. Marcus noticed her expression and started to turn. "Zara, what?" "Don't move," she whispered urgently. "Don't say anything stupid. Don't be a hero." But it was too late. Jin reached their table, and the jazz singer's voice faltered mid-note as she registered the shift in the room's energy. Within seconds, the music died completely. "Miss Williams." Jin's voice was silk over steel. "I didn't realize you frequented this establishment." "Mr. Jin." Zara's voice came out steadier than she felt. "I wasn't aware I needed to submit my evening itinerary for approval." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, that she'd pushed back. His gaze shifted to Marcus, and Zara watched her childhood friend try not to flinch under that predatory stare. "And your companion is?" Marcus, bless his stupid brave heart, stood up and extended his hand. "Marcus Chen. I'm an old friend of Zara's, visiting from Atlanta." "And you are?" Jin didn't take the offered hand. Instead, he smiled, and Zara's blood ran cold because she'd seen that smile before. It was the smile he wore right before he destroyed someone's entire life. "I'm her employer." Jin's attention never left Marcus's face. "Tell me, Mr. Chen, do you make a habit of taking other men's secretaries to intimate jazz clubs?" "I make a habit of having dinner with my friends," Marcus replied, his voice tighter now. "Is that a problem?" "It could be." Jin finally looked at Zara, and the intensity in his gaze made her skin burn. Security concerns, you understand. Anyone close to my organization becomes a potential target. I'd hate for Miss Williams's personal relationships to put her in danger. The threat was crystal clear. Zara felt rage bubble up through her fear, hot and reckless. Marcus, she said quietly, not breaking eye contact with Jin, I'm sorry, but I need to cut our evening short. Something's come up at work. Zara, you don't have to. Please. She finally looked at her friend, hoping he could read the urgency in her expression. I'll call you tomorrow. Go back to your hotel. Marcus hesitated, clearly torn between chivalry and self-preservation. Self-preservation won. He grabbed his jacket, threw cash on the table, and paused only to squeeze Zara's shoulder. Call me when you're safe. After Marcus left, Jin slid into the vacated seat with the fluid grace of a panther. Up close, Zara could see the muscle ticking in his jaw, the barely controlled fury in the set of his shoulders. That was inappropriate, she said, her voice low and fierce. You had no right. I have every right. Jin's hand shot out, not touching her but slamming palm down on the table between them. Do you have any idea what you've done? Sitting here, exposed, with a man I haven't vetted, in a location my security team doesn't control? You could have been photographed. You could have been followed. You could have been used. Used. I was having dinner with a friend. You were being careless. Jin leaned closer, and Zara could smell his cologne, something expensive and dark. You work for me, Miss Williams. That means your life is no longer entirely your own. Every person you meet, every place you go, every relationship you form, they all become potential weapons against me. Against us. There is no us, Zara hissed. There's you, the terrifying crime lord, and me, the woman who types your emails and pretends not to notice when people disappear after meetings. That's all. Something cracked in Jin's expression, something raw and almost vulnerable, there and gone so fast she might have imagined it. Go home, Miss Williams. We'll discuss this Monday. He stood and walked away, his men falling into formation around him. Zara sat alone at the table, her hands shaking, her entire world tilting on its axis. Because underneath the anger and fear, she'd recognized something in Jin's eyes that terrified her more than any threat. Hunger. Possessiveness. Want. If you think that confrontation was intense, just wait until Monday morning when Zara walks into Jin's office and discovers exactly how far he's willing to go to keep her. The weekend passed in a blur of anxiety and rage. Zara called Marcus Saturday morning to apologize and was relieved when he brushed it off, already planning his return flight to Atlanta. She spent the rest of the weekend rehearsing what she'd say to Jin, practicing her resignation speech, because no job was worth this level of invasion into her personal life. Monday morning arrived with Seoul's typical grey drizzle. Zara dressed in her armor, a sharp black suit that made her look every inch the professional, her natural hair pulled back in a sleek bun. She arrived at the office at 7:45, 15 minutes earlier than usual, and prepared Jin's coffee exactly how he liked it, black, no sugar, hot enough to burn. At 8:15 precisely, she knocked on his office door. Enter. Jin sat behind his massive desk, backlit by the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Seoul's skyline. He looked like he hadn't slept, shadows under his eyes, his usually perfect hair slightly disheveled. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Your coffee, Mr. Jin. Zara set the cup on his desk with careful precision. Sit down, Miss Williams. I prefer to stand. That wasn't a request. Zara's fingers curled into fists, but she sat, spine straight, meeting his gaze with all the defiance she could muster. Jin steepled his fingers, studying her like she was a problem he needed to solve. I had Marcus Chen investigated over the weekend. White-hot fury exploded through Zara's chest. You did what? His clean, Jin continued as if she hadn't spoken. Childhood friend, grew up in your neighborhood, works in tech consulting, no criminal connections, no debts, no suspicious associations. He's exactly what he appears to be. How dare you? Zara's voice shook. How dare you invade his privacy, investigate my friend like he's some kind of criminal? I dare because it's my job to know everything about everyone in my orbit. Jin cut her off, his voice rising. I dare because 3 months ago, Park Ji-hoon tried to get to me through his accountant's daughter. They kidnapped her, tortured her for information, and when she had nothing to give, they sent her back in pieces. I dare because the moment you became my secretary, you became a target, whether you want to acknowledge that reality or not. The words hung in the air between them, brutal and true. Zara felt her anger deflate slightly, replaced by a cold understanding of the world she'd chosen to work in. Then fire me, she said quietly. If I'm such a liability, if my existence puts me in danger, then let me go. No. The single word was flat, absolute. Why not? Jin stood, moving around his desk with predatory grace until he was standing directly in front of her. Because you're the best secretary I've ever had. Because you're the only person in this building who isn't afraid to tell me when I'm being an ass. Because in 18 months, you've never once asked me for anything beyond your salary and your vacation days. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was lower, more dangerous. And because the thought of you sitting in that jazz club, laughing at another man's jokes, looking at him the way you've never looked at me, made me want to burn the entire building down. Zara's breath caught. Mr. Jin. Jin. Just Jin. He was close enough now that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Say my name, Zara. This is inappropriate. But her voice came out breathless, betraying her. You're my employer. This crosses every professional line. I crossed that line Friday night the moment I saw you with him. Jin's hand came up, not quite touching her face but close enough that she could feel the heat of his palm. I've been crossing it in my mind for months. Every time you walk into this office with my coffee. Every time you sit across from me taking notes and I can't focus because I'm too busy wondering what you taste like. Every time you defend yourself with that fire in your eyes and I have to remind myself that I'm supposed to be professional. Stop. But Zara didn't move, couldn't move, pinned by the intensity of his gaze. You want me to stop? Tell me you don't feel it too. Tell me you've never wondered. Tell me that when I get too close, your pulse doesn't quicken exactly the way it's quickening right now. Zara's hand shot up, pressing against his chest, creating distance. What I feel doesn't matter. You're dangerous, Jin. Your world is dangerous. I've worked here long enough to know that people in your orbit end up dead or destroyed. I won't be another casualty of your life. Something shattered in Jin's expression. He stepped back, his mask of control sliding back into place. You're right. His voice was cold again, professional. This was inappropriate. It won't happen again. You're dismissed, Miss Williams. Zara stood on shaking legs and walked to the door. Her hand was on the handle when Jin spoke again. But understand this, Zara. I don't do anything halfway. If I decide I want something, I take it. If I decide I want someone, I make them mine. The only reason you're walking out of this office right now is because I'm giving you a choice. But every choice has an expiration date. Zara left without responding, but his words followed her all the way back to her desk. She tried to focus on work, on emails and scheduling and the 1,000 mundane tasks that filled her days, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Because the terrifying truth was that Jin was right. She did feel it. Had been feeling it for months. And that made her more dangerous to herself than any external threat ever could. The week devolved into Cold War. Jin barely looked at her during meetings, his instructions delivered through terse emails instead of their usual face-to-face briefings. Zara told herself this was better, that distance was what they needed. But the hollowness in her chest suggested otherwise. Thursday afternoon, everything changed. Zara returned from lunch to find someone sitting at her desk. A woman, stunning in the way that made Zara understand why people wrote poetry about beauty. She had that effortless Korean elegance, long black hair, porcelain skin, and eyes that assessed Zara with cool intelligence. You must be Zara Williams, the woman said in perfect English. I'm Lee Suminit. I'll be working as a consultant for Jin, so we'll be seeing quite a lot of each other. A consultant. Zara kept her voice neutral. In what capacity? Oh, various things. Strategy, security, personal matters. Suminit smiled, and it was the smile of a woman who knew exactly how beautiful she was and exactly how to use it. Jin and I go way back. We have a very special relationship. Before Zara could respond, Jin's office door opened. He stepped out, and his face lit up in a way Zara had never seen before, genuine warmth replacing his usual coldness. Suminit, you're early. He crossed to her, and Zara watched in muted horror as Suminit stood, placing her hands on Jin's chest in an intimate, familiar gesture. They spoke in rapid Korean, too fast for Zara to follow with her limited vocabulary, but body language translated perfectly. Suminit laughed at something Jin said, touching his arm, leaning close. Jin didn't pull away. Zara's stomach twisted with an emotion she refused to name. She sat at her desk, opened her laptop, and pretended to work while jealousy ate through her insides like acid. This continued for 3 days. Suminit was everywhere. In meetings Zara was suddenly excluded from, having lunch with Jin in his office, staying late when everyone else went home. Twice, Zara heard them laughing together, the sound drifting through Jin's closed office door like a knife between her ribs. By Friday afternoon, Zara was done. She drafted her resignation letter, saved it, and was reading it over one final time when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Jin wants to see you in his office. Now. SM. Zara's jaw clenched. She was being summoned through Jin's new consultant now? The disrespect was stunning. She grabbed her tablet and knocked on Jin's door harder than necessary. Come in. Jin was alone, standing by the windows with his back to the door. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, silhouetting him in gold. You wanted to see me? Zara's voice was clipped, professional. Close the door. She did, remaining near the exit. Jin turned to face her, and the exhaustion in his expression caught her off guard. He looked haunted, dark circles under his eyes, his suit rumpled in a way she'd never seen before. I bought the jazz club, he said without preamble. Zara blinked. I'm sorry. The Blue Note. I bought it. Last Monday. Paid 3 times what it was worth just to close the deal quickly. Why would you do that? Jin laughed, but there was no humor in it. Because I'm an idiot. Because I thought if I owned the place where I first realized I was in love with you, it would somehow make sense. It doesn't, by the way. I'm still an idiot. The world stopped spinning. You're not in love with me, Zara said, but her voice was barely a whisper. You don't even know me. I know you take your coffee with cream and 2 sugars, but you tell everyone black to seem tougher. I know you tap your pen 3 times against your tablet when you're about to disagree with someone in a meeting. I know you send half your paycheck back to your mother in Atlanta every month. I know you cry when you think no one's watching after we have meetings with particularly violent outcomes. I know you're terrified of me, but you show up every day anyway because you're the bravest person I've ever met. Jin moved closer, and Zara found herself rooted to the spot. I know that watching you with Marcus Chen made me understand that I'd burn this entire city down before I let another man have you. And I know that's insane, possessive, probably criminal in its intensity, but I've never pretended to be a good man, Zara. I'm not offering you poetry and roses. I'm offering you the truth. I want you, and I'll do whatever it takes to have you. Suminit, Zara started, but Jin cut her off. Is my cousin. And she's engaged to a very nice diplomat currently stationed in Tokyo. She's been helping me figure out how to approach you without scaring you away, though clearly that plan failed spectacularly. You were trying to make me jealous. The realization hit Zara like a truck. Spectacularly immature, I know. Suminit told me I was being an idiot. She was right. Jin was close enough to touch now. I don't know how to do this, Zara. I don't know how to want someone without trying to own them. I don't know how to love someone without my world's darkness destroying them. But I want to try. If you'll let me. Zara's mind was spinning. Every rational thought screamed at her to run, to maintain her boundaries, to protect herself. But her heart, that stupid, reckless organ, was pulling her forward. Marcus is my childhood friend, she heard herself say. I'm not interested in him romantically. The date was a setup by my cousin who thinks I need to get out more. Something fierce and triumphant flashed in Jin's eyes. And I have feelings for you, Zara continued, the words tumbling out now that she'd started. Have had them for months. But this is insane, Jin. You're right, your world is darkness. People die. People get hurt. How can I justify starting something with you when I know how it could end? You can't, Jin said simply. There's no rational justification. All I can offer you is that I'll protect you with everything I have. That I'll value your autonomy even when every instinct screams at me to lock you away somewhere safe. That I'll work every day to be worthy of whatever you choose to give me. His hand finally touched her face, gentle despite the calluses she could feel against her skin. And that I'll love you until my last breath, whether you choose me or not. This is a terrible idea, Zara whispered, but she was already leaning into his touch. The worst, Jin agreed, and then he was kissing her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and hungry and tasted like months of denial finally breaking. Zara's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and Jin made a sound low in his throat that sent electricity down her spine. His hands tangled in her hair, tilting her head back to deepen the kiss, and Zara forgot every reason this was dangerous, forgot everything except the feeling of his mouth on hers and the way her entire body was burning. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jin pressed his forehead against hers. "Stay with me," he murmured. "Not just tonight. Stay." And God help her, Zara heard herself say, "Yes. If you think the confession was explosive, the real danger hasn't even started. Because going public with this relationship will trigger a war that puts everything they've just confessed at risk." The next 3 weeks existed in a strange, intoxicating bubble. By day, Zara remained Jin's efficient secretary, though now their professional interactions carried an undercurrent of heat that made every meeting feel charged. By night, she discovered Jin Hyun Woo the man, not the boss, and that man was full of surprises. He played piano, Chopin mostly, his fingers moving over the keys with unexpected grace. He had nightmares that left him gasping and reaching for her in the dark. He loved American action movies but hated horror, which Zara found hilarious given his profession. He made her breakfast, actually cooked, and it was terrible, but she ate every bite because the concentration on his face as he attempted to flip pancakes was worth any amount of burnt food. "You're different when you smile," Zara said one evening, curled up on his penthouse couch while he worked through paperwork. They'd developed this routine. He'd work, she'd read, their legs tangled together, just existing in the same space. Jin looked up from his documents. "Different how?" "Less terrifying. More human." She closed her book. "Your employees would be shocked." "Good. Fear keeps them efficient." But he was smiling as he said it, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. "Why do you do it?" Zara had been wanting to ask this question for weeks. The criminal empire, the violence, all of it. "You're brilliant, Jin. You could have been anything." The smile faded. Jin set down his pen and pulled her closer until she was tucked against his side. "Legacy," he said finally. "My father built this empire, and his father before him. It was expected that I'd take over, continue the family business. By the time I was old enough to question it, I was already too deep. The empire doesn't let you leave, Zara. You die in it, or you die getting out. Is that what you want? To die in it?" Jin's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. 3 months ago, I would have said yes. Better to burn out maintaining power than fade into irrelevance. But now, he kissed her temple. "Now I want to live. Really live. Which means I need to start making changes." "What kind of changes?" "The kind that will make me enemies. The kind that require me to be absolutely certain that the people I love are protected." He pulled back to look at her. "Which brings me to something I need to ask you." Zara's stomach tightened at his tone. "What?" "The Seoul International Business Summit is in 2 weeks. It's a legitimate event, mostly, but everyone who matters in this city will be there. Business leaders, politicians, and yes, people from my world." Jin's thumb traced circles on her wrist. "I want you there as my date, not my secretary. I want to go public with this relationship." "Jin, I know what I'm asking. Once we're public, you become a visible target. My enemies will know you matter to me, which makes you leverage. But hiding you, keeping you secret, it makes me feel like I'm ashamed of you, and I'm not. I'm proud that you chose me. I want the world to know." Zara's mind raced through implications. "What about my safety?" "Already handled. You'll have a dedicated security team, 4 people minimum at all times. I've had your apartment building security upgraded, though honestly, I'd prefer if you moved in here where I can better protect you. Your family in Atlanta will also receive protection, just as a precaution. You've thought about this a lot." "I've thought about nothing else." Jin's expression was serious now. "I need you to understand what you're agreeing to. This isn't just about us anymore. This becomes a statement to every power player in Seoul that Jin Hyun Woo has a weakness, and her name is Zara Williams." "You make it sound so romantic," Zara said dryly, But her heart was pounding. I'm trying to be honest. If you say no, I'll understand. We can keep this private indefinitely. But he paused, choosing words carefully. I want to be able to touch you in public. I want to take you to dinner without hiding in private rooms. I want people to know that you're mine and I'm yours. Selfishly, possessively, completely yours. Zara studied his face, seeing the vulnerability beneath the request. Jin was giving her power over him, trusting her with his reputation and his heart, and that trust was more terrifying than any physical danger. I need to think about it, she said finally. Jin nodded, not looking hurt, just understanding. Take all the time you need. But as Zara lay in Jin's bed that night, feeling his steady breathing against her back, she already knew her answer. She'd already jumped off the cliff the moment she'd kissed him. Everything after was just deciding how gracefully to fall. The next morning, she told him yes. Jin's response was to pull her into a kiss that left them both late for work, and then to take her shopping for a dress that made her feel like royalty. The gown was deep emerald, the color striking against her dark skin, fitted in all the right places and flowing everywhere else. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the powerful woman staring back. Perfect, Jin said from behind her, his hands settling on her waist. You're going to stop every heart in that room. That's not ominous at all, Zara muttered, but she was smiling. The 2 weeks before the summit passed in a blur of preparation. Zara met her security team, Mi-jung, a former intelligence operative with a sharp mind and sharper instincts, Dae-jung, built like a tank and surprisingly gentle, and 2 others who rotated shifts. She learned evacuation procedures, safe words, emergency protocols. It felt like preparing for war, which, she supposed, it was. The night of the summit arrived with Seoul's typical humidity. Zara's hands shook as she applied her makeup, and Jin appeared behind her, taking the lipstick from her fingers. Breathe, he said softly. Easy for you to say. You've been terrifying people at fancy events your whole life. And you've been surviving in a world that tried to break you your whole life. This is just another room to conquer, Zara. And you won't be alone. The summit was held at Seoul's most prestigious hotel, all marble and gold and old money. Zara held Jin's arm as they entered, and she felt every eye turn toward them. The whispers started immediately, speculation and curiosity spreading through the crowd like wildfire. Jin introduced her to a parade of faces and names she'd never remember. Business executives, politicians, a few celebrities. Some were warm, others coolly assessing. More than one woman looked at her with barely disguised jealousy or contempt. Zara kept her spine straight and her smile professional, channeling every ounce of confidence she'd learned in 18 months of working for Seoul's most dangerous man. You're doing beautifully, Jin murmured during a brief moment alone. I feel like a prize pony being shown off. You're not a prize. You're the woman I love, and I'm showing you off because I'm proud and possessive and slightly unhinged where you're concerned. He brushed a kiss against her temple. Also, Minister Park has been staring at you for 10 minutes, and I'm contemplating creative ways to make him stop. Jin, no violence at the fancy party. You're no fun. Despite the tension, Zara found herself enjoying parts of the evening. The food was incredible, the music sophisticated, and watching Jin navigate this world with such easy confidence was fascinating. This was power at its most refined, violence wrapped in expensive suits and polite conversation. During dinner, Jin gave a brief speech about his company's legitimate business ventures, carefully skirting around the criminal empire everyone knew existed beneath the surface. When he mentioned the people who make this work possible, his eyes found Zara's across the room, and the intimacy in that look made her breath catch. After dinner, Jin led her to the dance floor. As they swayed to the orchestra's rendition of a classic ballad, the rest of the room faded away. No going back after this, Jin said quietly. Tomorrow, our picture will be everywhere. I know. Zara rested her head against his chest, feeling his heartbeat. I'm terrified. Good. Fear keeps you alert. But know that I've got you. Whatever comes, we face it together. What Zara didn't know was that at that exact moment, a photographer captured them. Jin's arms around her, her face tilted up toward his, both of them looking at each other like nothing else existed. That photo would be uploaded to social media within the hour, and by morning, Zara's life would never be the same. The backlash came faster than either of them anticipated. By Sunday morning, Zara's name was trending on Korean social media. The comments were brutal. Who was this foreign woman who'd somehow captured Jin Hyun-woo's attention? Gold digger. Social climber. Much worse things that Zara refused to translate. The racist comments were particularly vicious, attacking everything from her appearance to her presumed incompetence. Korean netizens could be ruthless, and they'd found a target. Jin was apoplectic. He had his tech team working around the clock to scrub the worst comments and threaten legal action against the most egregious offenders. But the damage was done. Zara felt exposed, vulnerable in a way she'd never experienced before. "I want to hire a PR firm," Jin announced Monday morning. "Someone to control the narrative, protect your reputation. Or we could just ignore it." Zara was trying to read through scheduling emails, but her hands were shaking. "Eventually, people will get bored and move on. I won't let them talk about you like that. Jin, you can't control the entire internet. Watch me." But worse than the online hate was the physical danger. On Tuesday evening, Zara was leaving the office late when Mi Jung suddenly shoved her sideways. A man materialized from the parking garage shadows, knife gleaming in the fluorescent lights. Dae-jung intercepted him with brutal efficiency, disarming and subduing the attacker in seconds. "Are you hurt?" Mi Jung's hands were already checking Zara for injuries. "I'm fine." "What? Who was that?" The attacker was conscious but restrained. Dae-jung had his knee on the man's back, already on his phone calling for backup. The attacker started laughing, a thin, reedy sound. "Message from the Beck family," he wheezed. "Jin Hyun-woo's foreign whore isn't welcome in Seoul. Next time, we won't miss." Cold terror washed over Zara. The Beck family was one of Jin's primary rivals, a brutal organization known for their willingness to target civilians. Jin arrived within minutes, having been alerted by the security team. Zara had never seen him so frightening, his face a mask of cold fury as he stood over her attacker. "Take him to the warehouse," Jin ordered, his voice empty of emotion. "I'll deal with him personally." "Jin," Zara started, but he was already moving, gathering her into his arms with surprising gentleness given the violence in his eyes. "You're coming home with me. Now. No arguments." Zara didn't argue. She was shaking too hard to protest as Jin bundled her into his car, his security detail forming a protective convoy around them. The drive to his penthouse passed in silence, Jin's hand crushing hers, his jaw clenched so tight she worried he'd crack his teeth. Inside his apartment, Jin finally exploded. Not at her, but at the situation, pacing like a caged animal while Zara sat on his couch trying to process what had just happened. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," Jin snarled, running his hands through his hair. "They went after you to get to me. Used you as a message, as leverage. Fuck, I should have known the Beck family would move this fast." "What are you going to do to that man?" Zara asked quietly. Jin stopped pacing, his eyes meeting hers. "Do you really want to know?" "No," she admitted. "But I need to understand what I'm part of now." Jin crossed to her, kneeling in front of the couch so they were eye level. "I'm going to hurt him. Badly. And then I'm going to use him to send a message back to the Beck family that touching you means war. And then I'm going to make sure every criminal organization in Seoul understands that you are completely off limits." His hand cupped her face. "I know that makes me a monster. I know you probably can't look at me the same way after this. But I will burn this entire city to ash before I let anyone hurt you again." Zara should have been horrified. Should have recognized this as the moment to run, to extract herself from this dangerous world before it consumed her completely. But looking into Jin's eyes, seeing the raw fear beneath the fury, she understood something crucial. He wasn't trying to control her. He was terrified of losing her. "I need to move in here, don't I?" she said instead. Jin blinked, clearly surprised by the response. "It would be safer. My building's security is military grade, and my apartment is essentially a fortress." "But Zara, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. If I'm going to be part of your life, really part of it, then I need to accept the reality of what that means." She took his hand. "I'm not leaving you, Jin. I'm angry and scared and probably in shock, but I'm not leaving." The relief in Jin's expression was almost painful to witness. He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she might disappear if he let go. "I'll make this right," he promised. "I'll end the Beck family's threat. I'll make you safe." And Zara, despite everything, believed him. The next 6 months were a study in contrasts. Publicly, Zara became a fixture in Jin's world, attending events, meeting associates, learning to navigate the complex social hierarchy of Seoul's elite. She was promoted within Jin's legitimate business operations, given real responsibility that had nothing to do with their relationship. She proved herself competent, earning grudging respect from people who'd initially dismissed her as just the boss's girlfriend. Privately, living with Jin revealed layers of the man she'd never suspected existed. He was vulnerable in the dark, admitting fears and regrets he'd never voice in daylight. He was playful, stealing her coffee and hiding her files just to watch her get annoyed. He was devoted, learning to cook her favorite foods, memorizing her preferences, making space in his carefully controlled life for her chaos. The Beck family situation resolved itself with brutal efficiency. 2 weeks after the attack, their leadership was decimated in a series of coordinated strikes that left no question about who was responsible. The message was clear: Jin Hyun-woo protected what was his, and the cost of threatening that was total annihilation. Zara tried not to think too hard about the violence required to achieve that peace. It was easier to focus on the man who held her each night, who played Chopin when he was stressed, who looked at her like she'd hung the moon. 8 months into their relationship, Jin took her back to the Blue Note. He'd kept the jazz club exactly as it had been that first night, but now it was closed to the public for the evening, just the two of them and soft music. "I've been thinking," Jin said as they sat at what had become their table, "about the future. About what I want my legacy to be." "And what do you want it to be?" Jin reached across the table, taking her hand. "I want to be the man who had the courage to change. I've been meeting with international authorities, Zara. Working on a deal that would allow me to dismantle the criminal aspects of my empire in exchange for immunity for my legitimate businesses." Zara's heart stopped. "Jin, are you serious?" "Completely. It won't be fast, and it won't be easy. Some people will fight it, see it as betrayal. But I'm tired of the violence. I'm tired of looking over my shoulder, of worrying that every day might be the day someone succeeds in taking you from me. I want a clean life. A safe life. A life where our children don't inherit an empire built on blood." "Our children?" Zara's voice was barely a whisper. Jin stood, moving around the table, and then he was on one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket. Inside was the most beautiful ring Zara had ever seen, an emerald surrounded by diamonds, the same deep green as the dress she'd worn to the summit. "This was my grandmother's ring. She gave it to me before she died and told me to give it to someone worth the family name. Someone strong enough to carry its weight and brave enough to change its meaning." Jin's hands were steady, but his voice shook. "Zara Williams, you walked into my life as my secretary and became my salvation. You see the monster I am and love me anyway. You challenge me, frustrate me, inspire me to be better than I ever thought possible. I'm not asking you to marry a crime lord. I'm asking you to marry the man I'm becoming because of you. Will you?" Zara was crying, tears streaming down her face as she nodded frantically. "Yes. Yes, you impossible, infuriating, perfect man, yes." Jin slid the ring onto her finger, and then he was kissing her, both of them laughing and crying and holding each other in the middle of the empty jazz club where everything had started with jealous rage and somehow ended with this: a promise, a future, a hope for something better. The proposal was just the beginning. Planning a wedding while Jin simultaneously negotiated with international authorities and managed the slow dismantling of a criminal empire was chaotic. But somehow, they made it work. 1 year after that first confrontation at the Blue Note, Zara and Jin were married in a small, intimate ceremony outside Seoul. Zara's family flew in from Atlanta, and despite initial reservations, her mother fell in love with Jin within 5 minutes of meeting him. Her cousin Yuki served as maid of honor, still apologizing for the disastrous setup date that had started everything. The ceremony blended traditions, a traditional Korean hanbok for part of the event, a white dress for the rest. Jin cried during his vows, which made Zara cry, which made half the guests cry. It was perfect and imperfect and entirely theirs. Their honeymoon in Bali was the first time Jin had left Korea in years, and watching him relax on a beach, actually relax, was worth every difficult moment that had led them there. "I want this," Jin said one evening as they watched the sunset. "A real life. A family. No more looking over our shoulders. We'll get there," Zara promised, her hand finding his. "Together." 3 months after the wedding, Zara stared at the positive pregnancy test in their bathroom, her hands shaking. She'd suspected for a week but hadn't wanted to get her hopes up. Now, looking at the definitive result, joy and terror warred inside her. Jin found her sitting on the bathroom floor, still holding the test. His face went through a remarkable journey of emotions: confusion, realization, shock, and then pure, unbridled joy. "We're having a baby." His voice cracked on the words. "We're having a baby," Zara confirmed, and then Jin was on the floor with her, pulling her into his arms, both of them laughing and crying. The pregnancy was complicated by Jin's overwhelming protectiveness. Zara had thought he was possessive before, but pregnant Zara experienced a whole new level of vigilance. He wanted her to stop working, to stay home where it was safe, to basically live in a bubble until the baby arrived. "Jin, I'm pregnant, not made of glass," Zara said for the 100th time as he tried to prevent her from carrying her own purse. "You're carrying my child. Our child. Do you have any idea how precious that makes you?" "I was already precious, you possessive idiot." But despite the overprotectiveness, Jin was also the most involved expectant father imaginable. He read every pregnancy book, attended every doctor's appointment, talked to Zara's belly like the baby could already understand him. When they found out they were having a girl, Jin wept with happiness. "I'm going to be such a disaster," he admitted, holding Zara close. "How do I protect her? How do I make sure she grows up safe and strong and knows she's loved?" "The same way you've protected and loved me," Zara said softly. "With everything you have." Labor came 2 weeks early, intense and fast. Jin was a wreck, holding Zara's hand and looking like he might pass out while she did all the actual work. But when their daughter finally arrived, tiny and perfect and screaming her displeasure at the world, Jin held her with such reverence that Zara fell in love with him all over again. "Hello, Sujin," Jin whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Hello, my precious truth." Sujin, meaning precious truth, because she represented the authentic life they'd built together, the truth of their love stripped of all pretense and danger. 6 months later, Zara sat in their penthouse with Sujin sleeping in her arms while Jin played Chopin softly at the piano. The criminal empire was mostly dismantled now, Jin's deal with the authorities nearly complete. They'd lost some allies, made new enemies, but they'd survived. "Do you ever regret it?" Jin asked, finishing the piece and turning to look at his family. That night at the jazz club, saying yes to all of this chaos. Zara looked at this man who'd started as her terrifying boss and become her partner, her husband, the father of her child. She thought about everything they'd survived, the violence, the threats, the transformation of his entire world. She thought about the life they'd built from impossible circumstances. "Not for a single second," she said truthfully. "This wasn't the life I planned, Jin. It was better." Jin crossed to her, kissing her softly, carefully, mindful of the sleeping baby between them. "I love you, Zara Williams." "I love you too, Jin Hyun-woo. My jealous, possessive, reformed crime lord husband." He laughed. "When you put it that way, it sounds ridiculous." "It is ridiculous. We're ridiculous. But we're also real, and we're also forever." Outside, Seoul glittered with possibility, a city that had witnessed their transformation from boss and secretary to something infinitely more precious. Inside, a family existed that shouldn't have been possible, born from jealousy and danger, forged through fire, and somehow, against all odds, filled with love. If someone had told Zara 2 years ago that she'd marry her mafia boss and build a life from the ashes of his criminal empire, she'd have laughed in their face. But looking at Jin, at Sujin, at the future they were creating together, she understood something fundamental about love. It didn't follow rules or logic. It didn't care about danger or appropriateness. It simply existed, transforming everything it touched, turning impossibilities into inevitabilities. And sometimes, just sometimes, the most dangerous choice was also the right one. Zara had learned that love was never the safe choice, but it was always the worthwhile one. 3 years had passed since that night at the Blue Note, and Seoul had transformed around them just as dramatically as their lives had changed. Jin's deal with international authorities was finalized, his legitimate business empire now completely clean, built on technology and innovation rather than fear and violence. The transition hadn't been without cost, former allies who felt betrayed, rivals who saw weakness in his reformation, late nights filled with difficult decisions that weighed on both of them. But they'd survived it all. Sujin was 2.5 now, a force of nature who'd inherited her father's intensity and her mother's stubborn independence. She terrorized the penthouse with the confidence of a child who'd never known anything but absolute love and security. Appa. Sujin's voice rang through the apartment as Jin returned from work, and Zara watched from the kitchen as their daughter launched herself at her father with complete faith that he'd catch her. He always did. There's my precious truth, Jin said, lifting Sujin high until she squealed with delight. His Korean had softened over the years, less of the crisp business formality, more warmth threading through every word. Did you terrorize your mother today? We painted, Sujin announced proudly. I made mommy. Jin caught Zara's eye over their daughter's head, and the love in that look still had the power to steal her breath. 3 years, a wedding, a child, complete transformation of his life's work, and he still looked at her like she was the most miraculous thing he'd ever seen. Show me, Jin said, and Sujin dragged him toward the refrigerator where her latest masterpiece was displayed with pride. Zara returned to preparing dinner, a skill she'd actually developed over the past few years. They still employed staff for security and maintenance, but the penthouse felt like a home now rather than a fortress. Photos covered the walls, their wedding, Sujin's birth, family vacations, Jin's rare genuine smiles captured for eternity. Her phone buzzed with a message from Marcus, who'd become a surprisingly regular correspondent after that disastrous first date. He was engaged now, happily settled in Atlanta, and he'd forgiven her for the chaos of that night. In fact, he thought the whole story was hilarious and frequently reminded her that he'd technically brought them together. Dinner in 20, Zara called out, and Jin appeared in the kitchen doorway, Sujin having already moved on to her next adventure. Need help? He asked, but he was already moving toward her, hands settling on her hips, his chin resting on her shoulder as she chopped vegetables. You're distracting me. That's the goal. Jin pressed a kiss to her neck. I have news. Zara set down her knife, turning in his arms. Good news or bad news? Good, I think. The Kim Foundation approved our proposal. They're funding the youth center in Gangnam. The youth center had been Zara's project for the past year, a community space designed to give teenagers from difficult backgrounds opportunities and support. Jin had provided the initial capital, but Zara had wanted additional funding from legitimate sources, proof that their work stood on its own merit. Jin, that's incredible. She threw her arms around his neck, and he lifted her off her feet, spinning her in the small kitchen. You're incredible, he corrected, setting her down but not letting go. This was your vision. I just wrote checks. You did more than that. Zara cupped his face, feeling the slight stubble there. You believed in it. You believed in using your resources for something good. You taught me that was possible. Jin's expression grew serious. Everything good in my life started the moment I saw you at that jazz club and lost my mind with jealousy. Best decision I never actually made. Zara laughed. You mean your terrible decision to stalk my date and threaten my friend? I prefer to think of it as aggressively pursuing my happiness. But Jin was grinning now, that boyish expression that still surprised her. Though in retrospect, I could have handled it with more finesse. You could have handled it with literally any finesse. True. Jin kissed her, soft and sweet. But then we wouldn't have this story. And I love our story. Before Zara could respond, Sujin's voice called from the living room. Mommy. Appa. Story time. Duty calls, Jin said, but he stole one more kiss before releasing her. Dinner was the usual beautiful chaos of family life. Sujin talked non-stop about her day, mixing Korean and English in the way that made Zara's mother laugh during their video calls. Jin was patient and attentive, asking questions, making their daughter feel heard and valued. Watching him be a father still filled Zara with wonder, this man who'd been feared throughout Seoul, now making silly faces to get their toddler to eat her vegetables. After dinner, after Sujin's bath and story time and the complex negotiation of bedtime, Zara and Jin finally collapsed on their couch. The city sparkled beyond the windows, Seoul at night still one of the most beautiful sights Zara had ever seen. I've been thinking, Jin said, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting on his chest. About expanding the family. Zara's heart jumped. Another baby? Maybe. If you want. But I was also thinking about adoption. There are so many kids in the system who need families, and we have resources, space, love to give. He paused. I know it's a big decision. I just wanted to plant the seed. Zara tilted her head to look at him. You never stop surprising me, you know that. Is that a good thing? The best thing. She kissed him softly. Let's talk about it seriously. I love the idea of giving a child a home, a family. But let's make sure we're ready, that Sujin's ready. Always so practical. One of us has to be, Mr. I bought a jazz club because of feelings. Jin laughed, the sound rich and genuine. I regret telling you that story. No, you don't. No, I don't. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only came from years of learning each other's rhythms. Zara thought about the woman she'd been 3 years ago, so carefully controlled, so determined to keep her professional and personal lives separate. That woman would have been terrified of this life, this love, this vulnerability. But that woman also would have missed out on everything that mattered. Do you miss it? Zara asked quietly. The power, the fear, the empire. Jin was quiet for a long moment. Sometimes, he admitted. There was a simplicity to it. People feared me, so they obeyed. Problems were solved with force. It was brutal but straightforward. And now it's complicated. Now I have to actually earn respect, build relationships, solve problems with negotiation instead of violence. It's harder. He tightened his arm around her. But it's better. Because I get to come home to you and Sujin without blood on my hands. I get to build something that helps people instead of hurting them. I get to be the man you deserve instead of the monster I was becoming. You were never a monster, Jin. You were a man trapped in an impossible situation, doing what you thought you had to do. You always see the best in me, even when it's not there. It's always been there. You just needed someone to show you. Jin pulled her closer, and they stayed like that as the city moved around them, two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely way and built something beautiful from the wreckage of his old life. The years continued to unfold with the beautiful messiness of real life. The youth center opened to enormous success, Zara taking on more community projects while still consulting for Jin's businesses. Sujin started preschool, making friends with the fearless confidence of a child who'd never been taught to doubt herself. They adopted a son when Sujin was 4, a 6-year-old boy named Minho who'd been in the foster system for 3 years after his parents died. He was quiet and wary at first, testing boundaries, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But Jin's patience was infinite, and Zara's love was steady, and slowly, Minho began to trust that this family was forever. Watching Jin with Minho, seeing him gentle this scared child into security, Zara fell in love with her husband all over again. He'd once ruled through fear, and now he built families through love. The transformation was complete. 5 years after that first night at the Blue Note, Zara stood in the same jazz club, now thriving under Jin's ownership and her management. They turned it into a community space that featured local artists, offered music lessons to underprivileged kids, and hosted regular charity events. Tonight was their anniversary, and Jin had reserved the entire club for just the two of them, like that proposal years ago. 5 years, Jin said, pulling her onto the dance floor as a pianist played their song. Feels like 5 minutes and 5 lifetimes all at once. Poetic. I like it. Zara moved with him, their bodies knowing this dance by heart now. I have something for you. Jin reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. Inside were legal documents. Zara scanned them quickly, her breath catching as she understood what she was reading. You're making me co-owner of all your businesses. 50-50 partnership in everything. You've been my partner in every way that matters for 5 years. It's time the paperwork reflected that reality. Jin's expression was serious. I trust you with my life, Zara. I trust you with our children's lives. Why wouldn't I trust you with my business? Jin, Zara's eyes filled with tears. This is too much. It's not nearly enough. You've given me everything, a family, a purpose, a reason to be better. You've stood beside me through the hardest transformation of my life. You've loved me at my worst and celebrated me at my best. This is just paper, Zara. The real gift is you, choosing me every single day. Zara kissed him, deep and grateful and full of everything words couldn't capture. I love you, she whispered against his lips. I love our life. I love our family. I love every choice that led us here. Even that first date with Marcus. Jin teased. Especially that first date with Marcus. Without your jealous, completely unreasonable response, we might never have happened. I prefer to call it decisive action in the face of potential loss. You stalked my date and threatened my friend. Aggressively pursued my happiness, Jin corrected, grinning. They danced until late, just the two of them and the music and the memories of everything this place represented. The beginning of their story, the proposal, now this another promise, another commitment, another step forward together. When they finally left, Seoul was quiet in that late-night way, the city sleeping while they drove home to their children and their life. Mi-jung still ran their security detail, though the threats had diminished to almost nothing over the years. Jin's clean reputation and Zara's community work had earned them respect, even from former enemies. At home, they checked on Sujin and Minho, both sleeping peacefully, before finally collapsing into their own bed. This was Zara's favorite time, these quiet moments in the dark when Jin's walls came down completely and they were just two people who'd found each other against impossible odds. Thank you, Jin whispered into the darkness. For what? For saying yes. For staying. For loving me when I didn't know how to love myself. For giving me a reason to change, and for believing I could. His hand found hers under the blankets. For being brave enough to choose this life. Thank you for being jealous and possessive and completely unreasonable that night at the jazz club, Zara replied, smiling in the dark. Thank you for fighting for us before I knew there was an us to fight for. Thank you for becoming the man you are now, for our family, for everything. They fell asleep like that, hands intertwined, hearts beating in sync, two people who'd started as boss and secretary and become something infinitely more valuable. Partners, lovers, friends, parents, equals. The story that began with jealous rage and a shattered champagne glass had transformed into something neither of them could have imagined, a real, lasting, complicated, beautiful love that had survived everything thrown at it and emerged stronger. 3 years later, Zara stood in front of a crowd of young women at Seoul's largest university, giving a talk about professional success and personal courage. She'd been invited to speak about her journey from secretary to business co-owner, from outsider to respected community leader. The truth is, Zara said, looking out at the eager faces, I broke every rule I'd set for myself. I let my professional life bleed into my personal life. I took risks that could have destroyed me. I loved someone dangerous and let that love change everything. She paused, gathering her thoughts. And it was the best decision I ever made. Not because it was safe, it wasn't. Not because it was smart, it probably wasn't. But because it was real. Because sometimes the most important thing we can do is choose authentically, even when it's terrifying. Especially when it's terrifying. In the audience, Jin sat with Sujin on his lap and Minho beside him, all three of them watching her with identical expressions of pride and love. Her family, impossible and perfect. Love isn't about following rules, Zara continued. It's about breaking them when something matters more than the rules themselves. It's about trust and transformation and choosing each other every single day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. After the talk, Jin met her backstage, Sujin immediately launching into her mother's arms while Minho grabbed her hand. You were magnificent, Jin said, his eyes soft with admiration. I learned from the best, Zara replied. You taught me that transformation is possible, that people can change, that love is worth fighting for. I think we taught each other. They left the university together, a family built from impossible circumstances, proof that sometimes the most unlikely beginnings led to the most extraordinary endings. Seoul had changed around them, and they changed with it, growing and adapting and becoming something neither of them could have predicted. That night, tucking Sujin into bed, Zara listened to her daughter's sleepy questions about her speech. Mommy, why did you say you broke rules? Because sometimes, baby girl, the right choice isn't the safe choice. Sometimes you have to be brave enough to choose what your heart wants, even when it's scary. Like how Appa chose you. Zara smiled, brushing Sujin's hair back from her forehead. Like how we chose each other. Like how we chose you and Minho. The best things in life usually require courage. I'm going to be brave like you and Appa, Sujin declared, already half asleep. I know you will, precious truth. I know you will. Later, in their bedroom, Jin pulled Zara close, their bodies fitting together with years of practice. Do you ever think about that night? He asked. What would have happened if I'd controlled myself, if I'd let you have your dinner with Marcus without interference? All the time, Zara admitted. We would have missed each other completely. I would have stayed your secretary, keeping my distance, following my rules. You would have stayed locked in your tower of isolation. We would have been safe and separate and completely alone. Fate has a strange sense of humor. Or maybe jealousy has its uses, Zara teased. Your completely inappropriate, possessive response to seeing me with another man led to all of this. I prefer to think of it as love at first sight making me temporarily insane. You were already insane. The jealousy just made it obvious. Jin laughed, the sound rich and genuine. True. But it was the best insanity of my life. They fell silent, comfortable in the darkness, in the life they'd built together. Outside, Seoul continued its endless dance of lights and shadows, a city that had witnessed their entire journey from that first explosive encounter to this moment of perfect peace. And in the morning, they'd wake up and do it all again, the beautiful chaos of family life, the challenges of running businesses with integrity, the daily choice to love each other through everything. It wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. Because sometimes love didn't follow the rules. Sometimes it shattered champagne glasses and disrupted dates and made rational people do irrational things. Sometimes it demanded courage and sacrifice and the willingness to transform everything you thought you knew about yourself. But when it was real, when it was right, when it was worth fighting for, love rewrote all the rules and created something better in their place. Zara had learned that the hard way, starting with a jealous mafia boss who'd seen her with another man and lost his carefully controlled mind. What began with the question "who is this guy?" had ended with an answer neither of them expected. This guy was family, was forever, was the beginning of everything that mattered. And she wouldn't change a single moment of it. Not the fear, not the danger, not the impossible choices or the sleepless nights or the complete upheaval of everything she'd planned for her life. Because all of it, every terrifying, exhilarating, transformative moment, had led her here, to love, to family, to a life more extraordinary than any she could have imagined. In Jin's arms, safe in their fortress-turned home, surrounded by the family they'd built from the ashes of his old empire, Zara finally understood what her grandmother used to say, "The heart wants what it wants, rules be damned." And sometimes, just sometimes, following your heart even when it's terrifying, even when it's dangerous, even when every rational thought screams at you to run, leads you exactly where you were always meant to be. Home. And for everyone watching, if you've been moved by this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment below sharing your favorite moment. Your support helps bring more beautiful, emotional stories like this to life, and you'll be part of every heartfelt choice, every triumph, and every moment of love.